everyone who knows Nana, my name is Brianna, and Brett and I started our conversation off screen, so I had to hit record to capture some of the moments. So tune in now to learn some things you didn't know you needed to know. 80 years has been the most peaceful, like globally, but specifically like in like US history. Like they've had this comfortability, and it's all like, we won the war, but it's almost like so a lot of, and especially being in the US and from the US, we haven't had a war touch our shores since World War II, and that was in Hawaii. So like we haven't had a mainland incident in generations, like generations.
Yeah.
Like we've had it fucking good. And to your point, I think that the group that's on its way out that, got us and gave us this, like, we're badass, like really cemented that in history. They're almost like entitled. And then they look at the younger generations and say that we're entitled. But it's like, you did something that set the tone for the next 80 years. Okay, good for you, gold star. But you forgot. Like, you forgot what that means, first of all. And second of all, the world has changed since then, and you haven't evolved with it. And now you're angry because we're like, this doesn't work the way you want it to work anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot
yeah.
of, I have to love, you have to love that generation because they did some things right. And
Yeah,
they've
for sure.
forgotten. They have overlooked the generation that they raised and criticized what we learned from them and what we put into practice. And I don't know, I feel like there's this generation in their death gasps that really just wants to torpedo the Titanic and take it down. Everybody,
Yeah.
it's instead of just like being old and lovable and appreciating what, the love that's being reflected to them and the respect, they're out to like, how dare you? They criticize
Demanding.
everyone else for being that way. But where did that start? You can't throw not everything good came from that generation. And right now we're seeing the absolute worst of it. And that's going to be their lasting legacy.
Exactly. That's a really good point. I like that you said that. The other thing too is like you're holding the world to your standard that was,
when you were in your teens and 20s.
Yeah, and that standard has shifted. So you're measuring everybody by this standard. There's a lot of good things that came from like my grandparents and great grandparents. Like I have a very young family. And, I like the fact that we're shifting back to like local and more sustainable ways of doing things. I do think one of the worst things that America ever did was industrialize our food industry and put profits over people when it came to like marketing the food industry, as well as the health and wellness. Like our medical system, like that, just based on that alone, I would fight to stay in Europe. Like it is absolutely mind-boggling to me that we take the health and well-being of our citizens at such a like peanon level. Like we don't mean anything to, like we're just a profiteering machine for them. And it is so hard to explain to people in Europe what that really means and what that really is like to live with. And you're holding us to an archaic standard and stereotype that we have surpassed. And then you wonder why you don't understand this generation. It's like, are you trying to see how the world has evolved? No one's trying to leave you behind, but you're also not trying to stay with it, And I'm guilty of that as a parent too. Like I look around sometimes and I'm like, I am getting older and I am not doing things the way the 25-year-olds do it. And I don't know if I can keep up with that because I'm just like clawing to stay afloat. I don't know if you ever feel like that, but I definitely do.
I mean, it is changing. Yeah. I mean, so listen, my husband's grandmother who had 3 kids, she's first generation American, had 3 kids with this horrible person who was an alcoholic, abusive, derelict, beat her with barbed wire. And yet she went to church every weekend. Every Sunday, she was in church with those 3 kids. She ran that household despite all of this shitstorm that was in their house. And eventually she divorced him, which was like taboo. In South Dakota, You know what that church did?
Ostracized
Removed her
her?
name from the rolls. Removed her name from the rolls. You know what she did? Kept going. She kept
Good for
going
her.
because that was her. That was her place. It didn't matter if they felt like, oh, we're going to disown you. She showed up with her kids and went about her life. Didn't matter what anyone had to say about her. She was just her.
I think that's so interesting too. Like, here's a woman who was literally being beat to oblivion and nobody would
Yeah.
embrace her. And she had to be badass enough to stand up for herself and say, fuck you. And I think both of these stories are beautiful because my great grandparents, I had my great grandmother till I was about 24. She died within the year after my great grandfather, but they married when they were 14 and 18. And she was with
Yeah.
him for 70 years. And I
Yeah.
think there's something beautiful about the forgiveness. One of the children actually like lived with them for several years. The other woman ended up passing away I don't know the full story and I want to find out. Like, so she had this bastard child of her husband's in her house. And I remember her like she's a little Italian woman, first generation Italian American. She would chase them all around with like a spatula and like swat them like, get out of here, dude. And I remember her going after him too, just like all of them. And
Yeah.
when I found this out when I was a teenager that my great grandfather had this affair and everything, I was so flabbergasted because I didn't think you could have an affair. Like, I didn't think that was
Yeah.
possible in marriage
The
because it's so
Bible
naive.
says,
Exactly, exactly. And then, but she found a way to just like push through and do it, Whereas like, and in your case or your husband's grandma's case, it's like she was like, I am not tolerating this bullshit. And I'm going to
yeah,
do that this way. I'm going to do it my way. And both of those are so beautiful, like in their own way.
absolutely.
Like,
It
you know,
is it is the battle. It's the human struggle, and it's the way people survive. I want to tell you how beautiful this story comes full circle because she died in that same town, going to that same church.
wow.
My husband's father, my father-in-law, retired as a minister at that church, and it and
Wow.
it it has evolved. People can evolve. Churches, religions can evolve. People prove it all the time, but they also want to stay stuck in their areas. I got to meet his grandmother. I just loved her. I loved that she was, and they're all Pentecostal. So, I'm kind of this buddy to my husband, but I loved her so
His buddy
much.
too.
Yeah, yeah. They live in the same house. They're friends, and
They
that's
cohabitate
an
with a child.
exaggeration. That's an exaggeration. They acknowledge us, they love us, but I think she was blown over when I cared for her. And it was just like I have such respect for what you have done for your life because that's something we have in common. Because growing up in a very conservative household myself, in an era where,
Yeah.
in the 1980s, it didn't really matter where you are. If you're gay, everyone just assumed that you were either on the AIDS superhighway or on the on ramp. And so to draw lines of what's acceptable and where you draw that line and just move on, I think it's such a great lesson. And I just loved seeing that in her, somebody 2 generations ahead of me, a first generation American whose parents came from Sweden. They moved here
Mm,
for a better life. And of course, why are we here in Spain? For a better life.
yeah.
It's and it
Interesting.
yeah, I mean it's just I don't know. It's an interesting life is
Something
interesting.
to
People
admire.
are yeah. You
How
can
about that
find
Swedish
such
citizenship?
great yeah, I know.
Tell your husband.
Only
Get on
nine and a
that.
half more years.
Gotta start somewhere. Gotta start somewhere. So,
I
Brett, tell
know.
me a little bit about your upbringing. Where did you grow up? What was that like for you?
Yeah, I grew up mostly in Southern California. I was born in yeah, I mean in in the the gray, icy fields of Los Angeles.
Fair. That's fair. That's fair.
So I lived there for the first 7 years of my life, and then my dad was an airline pilot with Pan Am, and,
Pan Am.
I know, we build
Okay.
experience. We are experience, Pan Am.
That's amazing.
On since 1991, the same year as Montgomery Ward. So my dad was an airline pilot, and Pan Am was going through some struggles in the mid-70s. Uh, he and a handful of other Pan Am pilots learned about this program in Iran. The Shah of Iran wanted to really, I know, it's
Interesting.
universally in the air this week and every day. But the Shah of Iran was upping the profile of Iran Air and wanted to bring in American hotshot airline pilots who had military service to come in and serve as the first officer to Iranian captains and just elevate the level of service and the reputation of Iran Airlines, which back then had an absolutely perfect, stellar um, record, no crashes. So we moved to Tehran and,
Wow.
yeah, and lived in like the northeastern farthest reaches of the city, like 5 doors down. There was a perimeter road. On the other side of that road was wilderness with feral dogs that were very hungry and wanted to eat us. um, yeah, yeah. There was a family who had lived like 5 blocks from us in LA that we were very close to. And they moved over. And so from the front of our flat, we could see the back of their flat. And thus we became a chosen family. Tight, tight,
Yeah.
tight. They had 3
Incredible.
kids that I went to school with every day. We drove down to the community school of Tehran, which was like 60 to 90 minutes each way. Listened to a lot of music, Stevie Wonder, Rod Stewart, ABBA.
Like on the radio, I hate to sound like an idiot here, but just like on the radio, you had access to that music in Tehran then. Okay, just I want to set the historical scene. Like this is the 90s, and now okay, you had American
Well, that was the
influences. Okay,
70s.
interesting.
This was
Sorry.
pre-revolution. Was That was 1976, 1977, and then we made, the obvious move from when my dad started smelling a little smoke, and so he made the obvious choice and moved us to northern Idaho.
But yeah,
um,
absolutely, makes
yeah,
perfect sense.
yeah, first Tehran, then Idaho.
Wow.
And we lived there for, I don't know, 2, 3 years. It's just beautiful being a 10-year-old, 19-year-old kid there. During the summer, my mom would give me 25 cents and say, "Get out of my
Go.
house." And I was
Wow.
glad to hop on my bike. It was like lean on me. We would
Yeah.
just, the group of us kids, we would hop on our bikes and there were adventures and misadventures and all sorts of stuff that we probably shouldn't have done, but we're still alive today.
Yeah. Living
And then
life.
we moved to, yeah, I know. You can't live without having something to overcome, like getting
Oh my
stuck
God, I
in
can't
a
believe
in
you
a
said that.
sand pit.
Abso-fucking-lutely. You have to understand a bit of suffering to really understand life.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sorry, I swear
So
a
then we
lot in
moved.
this.
That's okay. That's okay. I
Same.
swear considerably because it's cathartic. But
Yeah,
I
absolutely it is.
tend to, I don't know, like if I'm on camera, if I'm around my
You
parents,
do you.
yeah. It's not that I don't. I had a boss that swore heavily and she wondered, she's like, are you one of those Bible thumpers? And I was like, fucking A, yeah. She's like, cause you don't swear. And I was like, well, there you go.
Yeah,
Yeah, there is a
there you go.
God. I went to churchly school. So we lived in San Diego. That's kind of where I did my growing up from age 10 to 18 when I went to college,
Mm,
and went to school in northeastern Iowa. Des Moines is the middle of nowhere. We were 4 hours from there. And then moved to
4
Washington,
hours.
D.C. and lived there for 35 years until we moved here.
Wow.
Yeah. And I loved living in Washington, D.C. People love to rag on it because they elect people to go there and act very poorly. But when you get into the neighborhoods, people move there to make the world a better place. I had no idea what I was doing, but I wanted to be a part of that. And along the way, ended up aligned with some really amazing friends that do really cool stuff. And, I was joking earlier, half joking, half sharing the truth about having to add two letters to the G's and the L's. But in the mid 90s, I was asked to go work in Nashville, Tennessee on the reelection campaign for Bill Clinton and Al Gore. And I was like, well, why would I? Stupidest question I could have asked. Why would you want me to go to Tennessee? I know Iowa and California. And there was like yeah, our vice president is from Tennessee and we want him to look really good. I was like, I love him. Okay. I mean, stupid me, but yeah, okay. I'm there. Just all right. What am I going to do? And the answer was open-ended. Make a difference. Help. Find find where the potholes are and fill them in.
Mm,
Yeah. So I got to work on a major political campaign.
that's
I
pretty cool.
saw the amazing work these people were doing, reaching out to women and religious groups and the different ethnicity. That's my Castilian. A massive African American voter outreach, students, youth, and I didn't see. This is Tennessee. There are lots of people like us there, but I
Hmm.
didn't know that. I didn't see that. But I found a network, and it was a very strong network of LGBTQ plus people. And some of these people are still my friends. I am in awe of some of the people that I met. And we engineered together the state of Tennessee's first ever LGBTQ plus vote in any
Wow.
campaign of any sort in the history of Tennessee before 1996, there had never been an effort to draw out the gay vote. And I was like, listen, I know Alan Tipper are our people. I know they're standing up for us and they're doing things for us. And I know there are people like me here that we need to
Mm,
reach. And we ended up winning the state.
that's awesome.
1976, 76, 96. Yeah. Um, yeah. And
That's
so some of
incredible.
my, yeah. And then so some of my friends along the way have become highly influential people. They have been, had been, are still. But I think the smartest thing anyone ever told me who became, like an advisor to the president who ran a couple of presidential campaigns as a campaign manager. And I looked at her and I said, will you remember the little people after a while? And she's like, listen, this is Mary Beth Cahill. Look her up. She's like, listen, Brett, that's a silly question because I'm a regular everyday person. I'm an ordinary person in a position to do extraordinary things. I
Mm,
get to do or extraordinary things, and that is a privilege. But at the end of the day, it's just little old me every day. And so
I like that.
that's how I become people like friends with, and it's not just Democrats, it's Republicans as well.
Mm,
People who
yeah.
went to Washington, D.C. to make a difference.
I think that's really important too because you have to straddle both sides. And I think that there's a lot more, we're a lot more like than disalike. I think we're a lot more similar. And we're
Yeah.
just, touted as adversaries when really many of us have the same goal. We might not have the same approach to that goal. This is one of the reasons I love like where my son goes to school is because it's an all-inclusive approach. Like we don't have to agree at the process, but we can agree to the outcome and then we can if that we achieve that outcome, we can figure out the process. So I think it's great that you're highlighting you have to have friends on both sides and it's
Oh,
not a
yeah. Well, and
it's not
sometimes it's funny. Yeah. Sometimes it's funny. I grew up in a Republican household. I
that
am
that's
expected to turn a leaf any day now and see the
Any day.
weirdness of my ways and just become a Republican. Not going to happen.
Got it.
But, but I have a lot of family that are varying degrees of conservative, and I don't dislike them. In fact, I love them. I love where I came from because you have to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
And it was a wonderful childhood. My cousins, my aunts and uncles. It was a really wonderful place. I come from a great place of,
Yeah.
but at a certain point, things changed and people became very noisy. And, being a black sheep, you're just told, simmer down now, we can't talk about this with you because you don't understand. It's like, well, no, it's not that I don't understand. It's not that we disagree. It's the noise you're making. And it's horrific to have somebody that you love say, hear you in distress and say, doesn't matter. I don't
Yeah.
care. I don't care. That is the absolute least family values oriented a family member can be.
Yeah. When your allegiance is too
And
much to a party than to like the people in your life, that is a problem.
yeah.
I would agree with that.
And at that
I have
point, as a black sheep, a white sheep, spotted sheep, it doesn't matter. I'm going to put that wall with sound proofing between me and that person.
yeah.
And, like I don't need to live with that sort of everyone should go
Mhm.
out and get bitten by a rattlesnake because so and so says it's good for you. All right.
Yeah.
I don't think it is, but I wouldn't do it if I were you. But if you must, just leave me out of it, okay? I don't wanna know about it.
I think that's a good point. Like I've always been so I grew up in a very Republican, like, conservative household for all intents and purposes. But my dad was always like challenge the system, challenge the status quo. And I came to really I'm more libertarian than anything. I'm fiscally conservative. I'm socially liberal. I believe that everybody deserves a place at the table. It's just me personally. How do you
Yeah.
come to a cohesive solution if not all everybody's represented? It's just not possible. I also have the mentality that if you align too much to anything, you are worrisome. So whether that's drugs, alcohol, political parties, religion, whatever you worship outright that you think you are right in, when you are too tethered to that, you can't look in the mirror and say, do I need to reassess this? That is the problem. And I know a very similar, I have a lot of people in my family that are very right winged and they think that is the only way. And then, there's times when I'm like fighting with my niece because she's very liberal, she's a teenager and she has this, the antithesis approach. And you're like, actually, like, we have to find somewhere in the middle because that is where the truth is. Like, there's all of these different things at play. And so I'm a big proponent of if you are too tethered to one thing, like, you are the problem. Like,
Yeah.
there has to be a solution for that. So you've
Yeah.
spent all this time in DC and you
Yeah.
have all these amazing experiences. What happened in the last few years that prompted you to relocate as an adult now overseas?
Yeah.
What happened?
Oh, it came really swiftly. But let me back up just a little bit. Like, almost 10 years ago, um, my husband and I went on vacation. I was permitted, to go on vacation with him and a handful of his best friends, and we ended up traveling to Spain, Madrid, Madrid, Sitges, Barcelona, and it didn't take long to just completely fall in love with it. Got to Madrid, a world capital, and I was like, this is feels just like Washington, D.C., only I don't hear any gunshots.
Right,
I don't
exactly.
I don't see a lot of belligerence. I'm sure that there's an undercurrent of political discourse that's not always pleasant, but I don't know, there was something. I mean, we got to Sitges, and I was like, okay, life on the beach, being served cava. Yes, please.
Yeah, gracias.
Then I got to Barcelona, and I was like, just blown away by
Yeah.
the inspiration that goes into the window for some random
Mm.
apartment building, the doorways, the sidewalks with florets. And that's just the little stuff. Like, forget Sagrada Familia, forget about Palau de Musica. There are so
Mhm.
many just amazing pieces of artwork that are
Yeah.
buildings
Just walking
or
through.
that are
Yes.
actual artwork in Barcelona.
Yeah.
And the people, my gosh, they get a bad reputation for really being difficult, but one thing that I learned about living in Iran, the axis of evil, where they all hate us and want us to die, that's not
Yeah.
actually the truth. What you
It's just the
hear
government.
is just propaganda. The
Yeah.
governments don't get along very well, they don't behave very nicely. But the Iranian people are lovely and very charismatic and warm. And we went to Barcelona and I was kind of expecting this like foreigner, tourist, but you start
Right.
having a conversation with them and they are just lovely. And they live there every day, so they don't sort of recognize the inspiration through the new eyes of somebody who's never seen it before.
Yeah, especially for how
So,
old it is too.
yeah. So flattery
Yeah.
is, it will get you everywhere. And we enjoyed the conversations that we had with people there. We came back from that vacation. I was like, how did we feel so at home there? How is life? The air is just easier to breathe. The people, they're getting things done. I mean, I love Washington, D.C. My world is in Washington, D.C. It is a rough place.
Yeah, it is. Very
It is a
rough
rough place.
in a lot of ways.
Yeah, you've got a choice. In or don't. And if you're
Yeah.
not,
Die. Drown.
don't live
You're
there.
out. You're gonna be in the Anacostia River, baby.
Yeah, pushing logs from under the
Yeah, exactly,
surface.
exactly. Oh my god. So you fell
So
in love with Spain, and
fell in
then
love with Spain.
because
I was like, how can we get back there? How can we live there? And what I learned was, I'm running a successful real estate practice here in Washington. I'm doing nothing to improve the bigger world, but I'm doing everything I can to improve the personal lives of the people who need to buy and sell homes.
mm,
Being a part of that, anyway, I was running a very successful business. And so the idea of how do we get a job in Spain? Well, you can't because you have to be an EU citizen. Well, how do you become an EU citizen? Well, you have to live there as a citizen for quite a considerable amount of time. You can
yeah,
also buy property there until April of last year. That was one way that you could gain residency, and an easier path to citizenship. But eventually, it was like, okay, well, let's get back to the business at hand, and we'll put that on the back burner. We went back to Spain a couple more times, and it was just different places. Took our daughter there so she could see it, and she loved it. And then, like life, having a kid,
yeah,
just you are getting by every day, working long
so true.
hours, taking care of your child, taking care of your spouse, taking care of your home, maintaining your friendships, building new friendships. And we eventually started traveling to other places because as it turns out, the world is kind of a big place. There are
A
lots
little
of
bit.
beautiful places. And so we visited some amazing parts of the world. And each time when we were done, my husband Matt and I would be like, "So Spain
Yeah,
or Sweden?" Like,
yeah,
Sweden is amazing, but it's not Spain.
yeah. Heard that.
Thailand or Spain? Thailand is amazing. Laos is amazing.
Yeah,
Cambodia. And you can live in these places very well. So beautiful. Such wonderful people. In every place that we went, nothing was quite as remarkable as this country. And
I
so
get that.
when we had an election and the country elected the same person into office, and you'll notice I'm not going to use names. I don't believe in giving brand ownership. So we'll say the president was elected, and we'd been through that sort of presidency before, and it
Yeah.
wasn't pleasant, but we got through. Again, we visited Spain in 2017. That president was in office, and I was running a very successful business. When he was reelected, I was like, well, he's saying all of this stuff about FEMA. My husband works for FEMA, and was an architect for the IT um, uh, governance and the way that FEMA uses IT. When all of this garbage started coming out about, oh, FEMA is terrible, and they started sabotaging FEMA activities in the wake of a handful of terrible hurricanes that blew through the South, I was like, ooh, we got to keep an eye on this. Because my husband's federal job doesn't seem very solid. It was not at all the same. And it was immediate. It was immediate. My real estate is hyper local. It relies on the local economy doing well or not doing well. You have to sell, you have to buy. But the first week of this administration, he came in and fired a lot of people. And I came into last year with my biggest book of business, 18 years in business. And last year decided to be like this amazing stacked book of business. After the second week of this administration, half of my business packed up their things and walked off the pool deck. In the third week, another 25% of my business walked. And I was like, this is okay. I've got 25% of my business still in business needing me. So we'll make that happen. I've had lean years before. We can make this work. But what ended up happening was the mass firings and the threat of more created what's known in economics as a halt, worry, a conservative consumer that had been confident before,
Mm,
questioning what's going to happen next. When is the next shoe going
yeah.
to fall? And so there was all of this chaos thrown into the market. And, mid February last year, I was like,
Yeah.
well, here's what's coming. Sat down with my husband, said, here's what's coming. Here is what I see happening before my very eyes. Feels like we're in a sand pit and we're being pulled down further. So we need a plan. He's like, you make the plan. I've got my job to do, and it's really stressful. It's really important. FEMA might be on the firing line, but not today. And my
Yeah.
job is to continue dedicating all of my brain power to my mission. It's like, fine. Started researching other places. Like where would be a good place for us to go? He grew up in Texas, not there. I grew up in California. I would love to live in California. I would love to be able to afford to live in California.
Yeah.
So not there. I'm like, okay, the Twin Cities. I have so much of my chosen family that went from Luther College in northeastern Iowa to the Twin Cities. They are my chosen family. And I was like, okay, so how do we make that work? It's still pretty expensive there. And
Yeah.
healthcare, you know what? Forget it. Like we're going to have a car payment, and if I'm out of work because the local economy doesn't sustain the sale and purchase of real estate, and my husband's out of work because this president doesn't believe in
Right.
the mission of FEMA,
Right.
then we're going to have to sell our house. We're going to lose everything that we have. It was such like walk out to the end of the plank and be ready to be pushed in moment. And I went all the way there and I jumped, not literally, I jumped into that pit of despair, but thankfully I had fastened like a bungee cord. And I
It's good. Good
saw
practice.
this for like 20 seconds. I was like, we're going to lose everything. Everything that we have worked so hard for, everything that we have dreamed of, everything that we have built for our child, we're losing. And then I bounced right back up and I was like, but you know what? We're not the first people this has happened to. These are only things as long as
Yeah.
we've got each other and we're safe and we're healthy, we're good. We're good. Okay.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to
Yeah.
go about I'm going to go about building this plan. And it's not going to be in the US because we can't afford to live here. Healthcare
Yeah.
alone. Like where
Alone.
would we
Exactly.
go? Yeah, where would
You
we
can't.
go? He's unemployed. My job relies on the local economy. Like
Yeah.
I'm bringing in no
So
money.
much to consider.
How do like an unemployed family with a child, how does that work? And I'm not unemployed. I've got a business.
But still.
He ended up taking, there was a buyout offered to federal employees, which was like, here's what we're going to give you. And you'll have your salary for 6 months.
Mhm.
You'll be paid out your uh, paid time off. You don't get any preference if you are applying for a job with the federal government. You go away. So he took that. And meanwhile, I was like, okay, outside the United States, where can we go? Where can we live? And I was like, East Spain. But I did extensive research
Yeah.
and I wanted to start with where would we find home? Where would we feel supported? What countries share our values?
Mm.
And where do I even start? And I was like, you know what? I am a gay man. I've lived in a country where people call me names and tell me I'm going to die of AIDS and I deserve it, where religious bodies don't welcome us. They trash talk us, the opposite of their mission.
Mhm.
I was like, let's find a place that is inclusive of us. Because then things from there will be easier. So I found this thing called the Equal Dex, and they rate. It's a great organization and a phenomenal resource. They rate the countries from best to worst,
Yeah.
inclusive of laws and culture of people. And and I was like, okay, the United States is tied in 28th place, so let's look at the countries that are better. I started there and then I was like, all right, what are the countries where we can find work or
Yeah.
that will support work? Where's there a great place to raise a family? What countries are safer than here?
Yeah. Most everywhere,
What it Yeah,
depending on
where
how you
there
measure it.
good access to schools, healthcare,
Yeah.
all of these. I created 7 criteria after LGBTQ plus forward thinking
Yeah.
countries. And I whittled down the, 27 countries down to like 12 places like Uruguay, which has a phenomenal
Uruguay's
standard
beautiful.
of living and
Yeah.
equality and democracy.
Yeah.
We'd never been there. And Malta, same. And we've got dear, dear friends that live in Malta. And I'll tell you what, if there is anyone with the most beautiful way of speaking, it is the Maltese. I mean, just read the phone book to me all day long.
Aw,
It's so beautiful and soft. Anyway, Germany, Iceland, Thailand, and in the end, Spain
still
just
Spain.
seemed to speak the loudest. And it
Mm.
wasn't just our favorite. It wasn't just an emotional decision. It was a decision based on uh, aligned values.
Yeah.
All of the all of the criteria were met. It is an
Mhm.
affordable place to live. Healthcare here, it doesn't even
Mhm.
compare.
Right.
Like what we're paying for an entire year would be less than we would be paying for a month in the US.
Yeah.
Only in the US, it comes with deductibles and
Yeah. I talk about this all the
all of
time
this
too.
garbage and an interpretation that someone sitting behind a desk that has no life experience and now AI gets to make decisions about what's covered by
Yeah.
insurance and now what's your burden to pay. It became clear to us, given what we had experienced of Spain, given what the data was telling us, that this was the right place. And I have to say, all of our hopes were like this. What Spain is
Yeah.
delivering doesn't even show on camera. Every day, Spain, the Valencian community,
Yeah. I think especially here.
like it's safe to say that in the United States, they don't like strangers. The same thing could be said about here in Valencia in Spain.
Yeah. I
Only
get that.
the way that is met is very differently. Instead of like the yelling, we speak English here. Okay, then take the shit out of your mouth and speak real English. Versus here, where people don't like the unfamiliarity. So they trip over themselves to create it. They don't want
Mhm.
you to be a stranger. They want you to be familiar. They're not yelling at you
Yeah.
because your Spanish is trash. They
Thankfully.
are, they will say, I'm sorry, mi English, no good. And I'll say,
Mhm.
vale, mi español es mejor que mi inglés. Mi inglés,
Yeah.
horrible.
Yeah.
So
I think that's a
I
really
do
good thing
everything
to
that I
highlight.
can to meet them on their level and to honor the community that has invited us here
Well, I
because
didn't
it's
really
so
invite us,
vastly
but they are
different.
accepting us. They are
Yeah, yeah,
accepting
yeah,
us,
yeah, yeah.
which is
Well, no,
nice.
we're here and yeah, we're here by our choice because they've allowed
Mhm.
us, but they've also embraced
Yeah.
us.
Coming
You
back to that
speak
being
with, I
embraced.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, we talk with the folks in our adult musical theater that are from here, and they want to know about us
Yeah.
as much as we want to know about them. And you know what's delightful is when they know we want to speak Spanish, so they'll speak
Yeah, yeah,
Spanish to
yeah.
us, and then they come to
Exactly.
us with silly little questions like, "What does it mean? It's so on right now. This doesn't make sense." And I'm like, "It
Yeah.
really doesn't. It really
The
doesn't.
idiosyncrasies.
It doesn't."
One of the things I think that you highlighted that's really important is the criteria that each person needs when they're thinking about moving abroad and doing an in-depth like study. Looked at, we had spent a month in Argentina, thinking we were going to end up in Argentina, and going to Uruguay. I went to Costa Rica to see if it was a fit for our family. I did so much research on Switzerland, all these things. So I think it's really good to highlight that for people who are thinking about moving abroad. Like, you have to know what is meaningful to your family and what your non-negotiables are. And then speaking about Valencia, because obviously I'm very partial to this place as well, and the welcoming of the community here. I think they are really welcoming overall. You definitely meet some people who would rather leave you than take you, which is absolutely understandable. But overarchingly, I think there's a warmth and genuine curiosity and acceptance here. As long as you don't try to impart your culture too much, they're still Valencians and they're still going to do it their way.
Oh
And
my
they're not going
gosh.
to be influenced. infiltrated by any other parameters. And I think you can see that when I admire this so much is that the Valencian language, Valenciano, that was supposed to be eradicated under Franco. So they were very proud people and they're not going to throw it in your face. They're not going to call you out, but they are going to assert themselves. And I just love that. Like, this is,
Yeah.
I think it's such a beautiful thing. And, they're really kind to Americans, which is nice.
I
Thank
know,
you.
I know, I know. And the thing is, like, when you are kind to people, people want to be kind back.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the things that I've noticed about the Valencianos is um, what my mom taught me growing up. Be nice. It's much harder to be nice than it is to be ugly. It's very easy to be ugly. But on the other side of being nice is relationships. If you're
Yeah.
going to be ugly, those relationships have and they find a way of dissipating. And I have been really delighted here to find that by and large, people want to make your day a better place because it
Mm,
makes their day a better place. There's so much paying it forward here.
yeah.
Oh, it's such great energy. It's such a great way of doing things. And I know that the city is very rooted in history and tradition, and it's very tight knit. The people who are born here go through diapers together here. They go through, you know, pimple patches together here. They go through school
Right.
together, pregnancies, child rearing, old age, they die. And it's not like Oklahoma because they don't know any better. It's because this place is built on relational functioning.
Yeah.
You go to the market and you know who gets the best service? It's not the person that says, please give me 13 lemons. Quiero
Yeah.
13 limones, por favor. That's it.
Yeah.
That's all the shopkeeper gets. The person who gets the best food has a conversation with them. And they're talking
Yeah.
about, here's what my kid did in school yesterday. How's your grandmother doing? And there's
Mhm.
all of this that happens and it slows us down and we want to come back. We want to come back.
Yeah.
We want to know more about their story. We want to share more about ours. And we might want more than those 13 lemon, like what's good here today? Not what's good, but what's the best thing? What should I walk away from here with?
Yeah.
And those are the conversations that I think I've observed and I've tried. There's a huge distance between where I am today and where I'll be in another 6 months and where I was 6 months ago. And I'll also say that my 6 month mark is like I've had a stroke. I've read about this. It's a
Yeah.
phenomenon. My Spanish has disappeared, but even my English, it's just really hard to
Yeah.
communicate.
It
I
is. It
can't
is. You
I
kinda
can't
lose
fight
it
it. I'm
all.
accepting it. I'm frustrated, but like the Spanish is there. I know what you're saying. I just can't talk right now.
Right. So how else has this process been for you in terms of, like, visas and that initial transition? What has that been like?
Yeah. Well, so we were really again, did a lot of research. Everything has been research based. We've got family members that are like, "You're going to make an emotional decision because you're an emotional person." And I'm like, "Go ahead and think that way." You told me I couldn't fly and I flew. I was a
Yeah.
former gymnast. I flew. I know how to do that. We did a ton of research, and we did a ton of outreach. And at the end of the day, not everybody responded. It's a busy, busy time for
For
Spain
sure.
and the organizations set up to help people come here. Wall Street Journal published last week, never before has there been as many Americans leaving the country since the 30s until this past year. So people have been busy and they're not all going to return your call or they're not all going to return your email, but you have to persist if you care about something. And we were able to do that and find a terrific advisor for obtaining
Mhm.
everything we needed for our visa, if it was even possible. And talking with them, okay, I sell real estate. It's hyper local, but I can sell real estate from anywhere. In fact, we have top producing realtors in our company that don't even live in the area. Shh, don't say anything.
I'm not gonna say anything at all.
Shh, don't say anything. I still live in Washington, D.C. I don't. I mean, I've been very clear with all of our clients where I live, but I've also been very clear and strategic about who's going to be responsible for their day to day. And they are
Right.
not a clone of me, but we are cut from the same cloth. So learning that I could do my business from Spain was extremely helpful.
Yeah.
In fact, it was really the only way that we were approved for our visa, the digital nomad visa, because I am earning income from clients who are active with my on the ground team. So finding somebody who could validate, yes, not only is this
Mhm.
possible, but you're tremendous candidates. Here's what you do. And they say, it takes anywhere from 3 to 6 months to get all of this FBI background check.
Yeah.
We need your birth certificate, marriage certificate. We need everything apostilled, which is, like the Department of State is supposed to stamp it as super authentic. We went through all of this that's supposed to take 3 to 6 months. We were done in 2 months.
Wow.
We started in May. We were done by July. And we were here on August 14th, 2025.
That's crazy. Good for you guys.
And along the way, like once we realized, okay, we have all of this stuff in process and underway, and it's all aiming toward success, successful visa in Spain. Now we need to find
Mhm.
a place to live. We need to find a school for our daughter. And this school thing was the first thing to fall into place. She had an interview at like 3 o'clock in the morning with the
Gosh,
headmaster of the school. And she was just, we did it. And, at 10:30 that morning, the schoolmaster sent us an email and said, "You're invited to apply." And I was like,
that's awesome.
okay, let's find a place to live. And then we found a phenomenal professional who I would say she held our hand all the way, like a very capable realtor, except she was here in Valencia and we were across the Atlantic in Washington, D.C. And the power of video and description, she found this lovely home in one of our favorite neighborhoods. She negotiated on our behalf. We rent a lovely home in Rusafa,
Mhm.
right across the street from the Mercat de Rusafa, a 10
That's
minute
nice.
walk. Yeah, a 10-minute walk if we're dragging our feet from our daughter's school. And the owners are not a corporation. They're not, investors. They are a Valencian family that raised their kids here and now live locally somewhere else, locally, but not in this home, not in this building, not in this
Right.
neighborhood. Having this place rented allows them to live where they want to live. I love being a part of this local community. And I'm so thankful also that the property owner, the landlord, was willing to take a chance on us.
Yeah.
And they're just most wonderful people.
That's awesome.
Sort
How
of,
has your daughter managed
yeah.
so far?
Yeah, it's funny because we were most concerned about her.
Yeah.
When you have a
Makes
child,
sense.
yeah, your needs are important, but you're
Mhm.
also a parent and you're there to serve a higher purpose.
Yeah.
And so her being a female in the US, where females aren't very well regarded, it was really important that she feel safe and comfortable and supported here. When we knew the school, we started establishing conversations with some of the other parents. We had uh, a couple of video calls with our child and other children so that they could have some familiarity. When we got here, we started booking play dates with some of the other families with kids at the same school, and, so by the time school started, she had herself a collection of friends that she
That's
might not
awesome.
call the posse, but I call the posse. The parents call the posse because there is a genuine fondness among those kids because they've all come here from somewhere else.
I see.
They're supportive of one another. There's this kind culture that they're a part of. She's scared of us asking, "How are you doing?" She's like, "Good. I'm fine." Like, I don't want to move back. Is that what you're asking? Because I love it
Right.
here. I don't want to move back. And again, Washington, D.C., our neighborhood was the only place that she knew. And she was kind of the mayor. She knew all of the kids, all of the adults, everybody's business. And yeah, like their backstory, she knew it all. And, to come here, a place that she had been once before, and we've taken her. I think one of the best things my parents did for me was the move to Tehran and then other places as well to get to experience other people outside our country kind of illustrates in person how normal they are, how like
Mhm.
us everyone is, how like
Yeah.
them we are. And so we did a lot of traveling with her, and she came here and she's like, "This is a gentle place. I can go get churros down the street. That's something I couldn't do in DC, even if there was a churros place down the street." But we
Yeah.
send her, if she wants a treat, here's €5. You have to go on your own. You have to ask for it in Spanish and you have to bring change back. So there are all of these great learning opportunities, and she's loving that limited sense of autonomy that she has now that she didn't have before. That
Yeah.
independence that's been just dying to come out. We were at a party a few weeks ago and the adults were having such a great time. And the kids were having a great time too. But at a certain point, she was like, "All right, I'm out. I'm done."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Well, we're not quite ready. You want to go play pool down at Metropolis?" And we become friends with the Sisters of Metropolis that are from Northern Ireland. They're so
Nice.
lovely. And they've created this inclusive, protective, cocoon like atmosphere. It's like Cheers. Or back in our old neighborhood, Moreland's Tavern. Metropolis is this collection of eclectic people from everywhere: Ukraine, South Korea, the US, Spain, Northern
Yeah.
Ireland. And so on a Saturday night, I texted them and I said, "She's on her way to you." And so she went, and an hour later, we showed up, and there she was playing pool with one of her friends. And by one of her friends, I mean someone in her 20s.
A new friend.
It's not like she's a child at a bar, which is perfectly permissible in Spain, by the way,
Yeah.
because they've taken away the taboo of children around alcohol.
Right.
I mean, there are certain
Exactly.
establishments like nightclubs, no, but this is a restaurant, they're a tavern, and they have a pool table. And so our
Mhm.
child is learning about geometry and physics on a Saturday night, thinking she's just learning to play pool.
How about that?
She's doing remarkably well. And I think I was the first one to be like, "Hell yeah, we're living in Spain." And then,
Mhm.
you know, you try and get things set up for work. Technology gaps at first were a little challenging, knocked me backwards on my path a few footsteps. It's not like every day is not sunshine. If you look outside right now, it's overcast in
Yeah.
Valencia, which gets 360 days of sunshine. I think we've been here for like a month and a half of not sunshine,
Yeah. You came
but
at a good time.
we won't tell the tourist bureau. There is an element of okay, you have to figure things out. Figuring things out
Mm,
isn't always easy. It's not as
no.
easy as having tostada con tomate or a cerveza at lunchtime. It requires patience and a level of,
I would say persistence.
yeah,
It definitely
persistence and
requires persistence.
tenacity that
Yeah, that's another good one.
we didn't have to face with our everyday before moving here. And it's not like we
Mhm.
have that every day now, but there were some adjustments. My
Yeah.
phone was really
I know
hard.
you
It was really
it's a
hard not to have
circle.
access to my phone. Yeah. But you push through, and the other side is sweeter than sweet.
Exactly. You've said how wonderful and sweet Spain has been. Were there
Yeah.
any disadvantages or surprising disappointments that you've encountered since you've been here? Like outside like the language barrier and the obvious ones. Like is there anything that has surprised you in a negative way?
It's all, like I'm the problem. It sucks to recognize that I'm the problem because I was a Spanish minor in college.
Yeah.
I was conversationally fluent in Spanish 35 years ago,
Right.
and my syntax, it's back there somewhere. My vocabulary is back there somewhere. That's been the biggest disappointment is how old my brain is. It
Yeah,
has
but let
nothing
me
to do with Spain. It has nothing to do with Spain. It has nothing to do with Spain. This place, I mean, listen, they've got a prime minister who welcomes immigrants. What? Immigrants? Immigrants can be good? That's
I
a
won't go down my
concept.
immigration rabbit hole. But I think the thing about Valencian Spanish as, and like Spain Spanish is first of all in the US we learn Latin American Spanish, which is vastly different. Like we don't they
It's
don't
very
use vosotros in
sing-song.
Latin America.
Yeah, yeah,
Um
yeah.
and I what makes me feel better is like I have a lot of friends here that are for like Colombian or like Peruvian in particular, and they tell me like our babysitters from Ecuador too, and they're like it's different. So so they have struggled with the accents, and even though they speak the language fluently, so that does help me feel better when I'm like at a when I feel like I'm an idiot or at a loss or at a crossroads. So I don't know if that helps you, but it helps me when I'm like,
Oh my gosh, yeah, no, 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 no. Like the American North and South American Spanish,
yeah,
especially Mexican Spanish, is
so
very
different.
"Hola, ¿qué tal, mi amigo?" No, here it's like "Hola, ¿qué tal, mi amigo?" It's just
Right.
it's staccato. I call it machine guns in Spanish, you know,
Yeah.
Americans and our guns. It's and there's not as much lilt and song. And you can, as an American who we respond to tone,
Yeah.
when there's less
Very
tone, you're like,
easily.
oh my God, they hate me. Oh my God, what they're gonna kill me. They hate me. They're very irritated. And then they crack a smile and you're like, oh, okay. And
No.
it's a very different, it's funny because it's Spanish. It's the
Right.
Spanish. The place where Spanish comes from. Go figure.
Right. But then you think about British English versus, American English too, and it's the same kind of thing. Like the accents are different, everything shifts a bit. And I think sometimes I want to go back to something you said too about being like welcoming and the way like Americans kind of ostracize foreigners to a degree. I think because Europe has such close borders with so many other countries, having multiple languages is just such commonplace, and we don't share that same ideology in the US because we are one big like continent, and our northern neighbors speak English, maybe some French in
Well,
there, and
they
our
also
southern
speak
neighbors speak
French, though.
Spanish. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I'm saying like predominantly, like it's an English
Yeah, yeah,
speaking
yeah.
entity. And, our southern neighbors speak Spanish, but a big mass of North America only speaks primarily English. So
Yeah.
don't have that same affinity or respect for languages that I think Europeans do, like, specifically. And I just think that's really interesting. Like, I hate when I go back to the US and I hear people say, "Well, we're in America, speak English." I wanna be like, "Well, actually, this person's probably way fucking smarter than you, so maybe don't be so rude."
Right.
Just saying.
Right.
Like, it's
Yeah.
something that I'm very conscientious of personally now. Like, I'm like, "Maybe you guys are just being jerks,"
Yeah.
having
Yeah.
that mentality.
Whenever I hear someone, there was this badass kid that I went to middle school and high school with. He was just a bad attitude, but he gave one line to a teacher being so awful, a teacher with an Irish accent. And he told the teacher, "Why don't you take the shit out of your mouth and speak real English?" And I was like, "Oh,
Ouch.
oh my God."
Rude.
But that has stuck with me as ugly American glee, awful American.
Yeah.
So here's what I meet ugly, awful Americans. We speak English. Okay, well, take the shit out of your mouth and speak real English. It's going to be my go-to. Leave people alone. Treat people nicely.
Yeah.
Don't show them your asshole. We don't need to see your asshole. Put it away.
Yeah. I think that's so sad because there's such a beauty with accents. You know, they tell a story of their own. I was talking about this with Celio and she did the podcast with me and I was like, I think there's something so beautiful because no accent is exactly the same. You know, the way I speak English
Oh,
is
I
different
know.
than you. And, you know, it's like a fingerprint. And, you know, to eradicate that because of our own prejudice and discomfort, because a lot of it is just choosing to be ignorant and it's a bit of fear in that, right? Like
Yeah.
somebody who's saying, you know, speak English properly has a bit of fear and animosity about themselves that they aren't that they're projecting, and I and that makes me sad for them. I have my own fears and insecurities every day as I navigate life in Spain, but I can't imagine treating somebody like that. Like, also, I'm a guest in this country, like, they can kick me out
Right.
whenever they want. So,
Yeah.
I'm just, like, grateful to be here. Please let me stay.
Same.
Kind
Same.
of thing.
Same. But at the same time, like the I'm gonna say it's not the typical American response. It's the outlier. It's become far
Yeah.
too common for someone to say we speak English here. They've already decided to make their day harder. To take my mom's
Yeah.
advice from when I was like 8 years old, it's so much harder to be nice, but it's so much harder to be nasty. It's because you're being repellent, first of all, and you're redirecting whatever is in you to
Yeah.
something that you're not, it's ruining your day too. You might think you're funny as shit,
Yeah.
but really
Yeah. Or cool, whatever.
you're having a negative impact on your own day and on the day around on the day of those around you. Um
Energy, man. Energy flows.
plus plus you know how the Republican Party used to be so proud of upholding diplomacy. Where's that? Where is diplomacy when somebody comes to your country and you are the shittiest host? Where's the win in that?
Question. That is a good question. I also know
I
that for a
just
fact it takes more muscles to frown than it does to smile. And so ergo that requires more energy to frown than smile. So you might
I
as
mean,
well conserve your energy.
at my age, in my
Yeah.
mid and leaning late 50s, the resting bitch face is easy. I look unhappy. I look like I'm
Oh,
frowning. It's just there. It takes a lot more
so
at
those
my
years
age
in
to be like,
DC. I'm just kidding. You don't look unhappy, but I would just blame
a
the DC if
lot
anybody says
of
that to you.
gravity defying muscles at work.
I know, right? Is there anything else you want to share about your journey from the US to Spain? Is there anything we haven't covered? Feels like we've got a lot in there.
I hope to stay here forever. I hope this place just continues to get better and better. Welcoming immigrants is and understanding the talent that they bring to the country. I love
Mm,
that. That is um that's a point of view that we've been missing in the United States. And I have a
I
lot
get
of
that.
friends that were born outside of the United States who chose to live there. And whenever they've become citizens, whenever they've chosen to live in my country, I've thanked them because they're bringing an
Yeah.
element of, oh my gosh, experience and a story. Some of my favorite, I'm a gymnastics junkie. And in my gymnastics career and the height of my fandom in the Soviets were the supreme, the sort of stoic, I'm not going to smile. I might have joy in my heart, but I'm not going to smile. And I'm going to show you the very best. The Romanian female gymnast, by stark contrast, would get out there and put on a show and delight people. And you know who we always wanted to win was the delightful presence. And
Yeah.
there are Soviet athletes, Romanian athletes, so many of some of my favorite figures in sports live in the United States now.
Mm-hmm.
And they're making it a better place. They're making it a better place by being wonderful people, by being brilliant artists, by bringing a different perspective. And I love that Spain is welcoming that. I also love that it's illegal for any child under age 16 to be on social media.
I love that. Me too. I love that
It's
so much.
so forward thinking, and it's puts protection of children is paramount for this government.
Yeah. Yeah. I do agree. I do agree with that.
I also love the position that this government has taken, receiving a lot of ire from the American president, that they're not willing to compromise on their values here. They're going to do
Mm,
what's right, and you can't bully them. And they've created this place, they've constructed this country, the modern version of it, based on a very dark dictatorship. They've been through
mm,
this.
yeah.
People in my generation lived with Franco and, very dark times. And so they have rebuilt very carefully. It's
I think
not
they're
to
very
say that
specific
there aren't, yeah, that's not to say that there aren't influences,
for sure.
um, or people that oppose equality for all in the government. I love how feisty the people are to create a government that's fighting for the people. And that's always when you see protests, it's because people have been harmed. And they want and the people want change. Very feisty, very they can get in an argument and put it away and have a beer. In so many cases I've seen.
Think it's also poignant to point out, well, I just think this about every government. It's like at least here you feel like you're being heard and valued. Even if the government has an agenda that's set against you, they're still going to at least make you feel like you have a place. And that's half the battle is like people feeling
Yeah,
like they're welcome and invited, you know? And I think that's what we're losing that nuance in the US because it's so polarized. And I think that's strategic in a lot of ways.
yeah.
Personally, just my personal 2 cents on that.
To be accused of not being a good listener, by people just who want to make a point or who say, let's not get excited about this. Let's not get emotional. It's like,
But humans are
you
emotional by
wanted to
nature.
draw out emotion, didn't you? But it didn't do you any favors. And you want to call me a bad listener, but I am. I'm listening all the time. You're right. This government has a way of not trouncing on people's concerns. Needing to be heard, you got a place at
Yeah,
the table.
exactly. All right, Brett, anything else we didn't know we needed to know about life in Spain or American
It's
politics?
lovely. Not everybody should move here. Yeah. Yeah.
No, no, no. Yeah, no, don't come. No,
Yeah.
thank you. No,
Yeah.
gracias. We've met
Place
the
is sacred.
quota. I'm the mom who knows not, and my name is Brianna. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you found something that